Hey, let's go live.
To make all my Bunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk here, the Pond Boss. It must be Tuesday. Let's go live and have a little bit of fun. Talk about ponds and lakes and fish and whatever you guys want to talk about. I'm hanging out at the house here. Hello, Jim Allen. Can't wait to hang out with you before long. Hey, I sent you an email a while ago. Check it out. See what you got. At least I hope I did. I meant to. Hey, Jason Dodd, what do you want to talk about? What I thought I'd talk about is muddy ponds. I got a fun call through the Pond Boss office a couple days ago from a sales representative for United States Gypsum. And his question to me was, is there a potential marketplace to help clear up muddy ponds? Well, I think U.S. Gypsum is seen an opportunity that they otherwise haven't seen because, and I'm about to learn more about gypsum than I absolutely want to know. Hello, Bill Shrum, good to see you. I'm going to learn a whole lot about gypsum that I didn't really want to learn, although I have to because it's fun. I didn't know that gypsum was such a big deal in agriculture. Hello, Tim Stewart. Good gosh, how'd you get the time off from over there at making those honeybees do what honeybees do? I was going to say making love to honeybees, but you don't do that. But hey, you're the honeybee guy. So Jason Dodd had a muddy pond. Gypsum would not clear it up, and that's the truth on some ponds. Some ponds will not clear up with gypsum. So what I've learned over the decades of trying to scratch my head and work through all this stuff is that muddy ponds are different based on what causes them to be muddy. Oh boy, that was a circular sentence. Some ponds are physically stirred up because of the fish that are in them or shallow water with wave action. Some ponds are muddy because the colloidal clay particles are so small that they are lighter weight than the water. Hello, Michael Ehrig. Danny Mack. Holy cow, good gosh, good to see Danny Mack checking in. Danny, I got a little red wine, and I mixed up an old-fashioned. Don't tell Debbie. She's out picking up a grandchild. So, water is muddy for more than one reason. What I tell people to do is, and I'll tell you a pretty funny story here in a minute, is to get a 1 gallon jug of their muddy water, set it on a shelf in the garage, and forget about it. Buddy Floyd, good to see you, man. Oh, man, I was just sending out an email. I forgot to include you. I'm going to make a note. Send Buddy Floyd. Send Buddy Floyd. Yeah, I need to send you that email. I totally forgot about that. About the field day coming up. Y'all bear with me a minute. Send Buddy Floyd the email for the field days. I'll do that right after this show is over. Boy, I'm so glad you're on here. Miller Lite. Hey, Jay. Good to see you, buddy. Where were we? Oh, muddy water. Here we go. So, water is muddy for a variety of reasons, and the hard part is trying to figure out what it is that's caused the water to be muddy. I'll always remember, I got a call from Bill Dance one day. This is quite a few years ago. And Bill said, hey, Bob, I got a 6-acre lake right next to my house, and it never used to be muddy. Now it is. So I started asking him some questions, and I said, so tell me, what's the water source? He said, well, up until about 2 years ago, it was only rainfall. He said, then I drilled a well. Well, that's a clue to me, a water well. So when water comes out of the ground, it's been under pressure. Down in that aquifer, there's pressure. Now, depending on the aquifer and how deep it is and a whole lot of different variables, that pressure can lend the water to do some things that it ordinarily would not do, like absorb more metals or minerals than it normally would. And then when it hits the air, it oxidizes those metals and minerals. For example, if a water well is full of iron and you pump some water out, you'll start seeing rust stains. You know, we had that at our place at LL, 2. when that water in that aquifer, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of the name of that aquifer. It's escaping me. I'll think about it in a minute. When we pumped that water out, as soon as it hit the air, the iron in it wanted to oxidize. So I ran it over a waterfall, a series of rocks that were just really basically iron ore rocks. And there was this slimy coat of rust on those rocks. The Woodbine Aquifer was the name of that aquifer. And lots of iron in it. So that iron would want to precipitate out. And so, as I was talking to Bill Dance, I said, you know what, get a jar of that water and set it up on the shelf in your garage. I'll come to Memphis in a couple, 3 weeks, and then we'll talk about it. Hello, Kevin Bjornson. Good to see you, buddy. Hanging out from Iowa. Eelgrass, good and controlled areas. Tim Stewart, eelgrass is one of my favorites. Hello, John Dyer, checking in from the Carolinas. Good to see you, buddy. And so, anyway, whenever I got to Bill's place, the guy's brilliant. He's a marketing genius. So I wanted to take a picture of the famous Bill Dance holding this jar of water up, looking at it in the light, right? So he's got this jar. He says, hey, come over here and take the picture over here. Well, I'm not thinking about that. So I come around and I take the picture of it with my camera. When I get home, I upload the photos to my laptop and I start looking at them. And the water's just as muddy then as it was the day that he put it in the jar. But in that picture was his Minn Kota trolling motor, his Evinrude outboard motor, his Triton boat. He had all this product placement, which is what marketing guys do, you know. So he was able to look at that as he was able to show that to all of his sponsors to show them, because I published that in Pond Boss. So anyway, as I got to talking to Bill, the reason his lake was muddy was because of the well water. And we started looking at ways to clear it up. Gypsum would not work in that one. You know, so Brother Todd, there's times that gypsum won't work. So when I start talking to people about muddy water, the first thing we try to figure out is what's caused it. You know, is it because there's something physically stirring the water up, which that happens. If you get a jar of water and it settles out and there's a layer of silt laying on the bottom of that jar after 3 or 4 days, something's physically stirring the water up. It could be wind action over shallow water. It could be carp. It could be catfish. It could be something that's stirring the water up. Otherwise, sometimes the water actually grabs clay particles and holds it in suspension because of what's dissolved in that water. Otherwise, it's colloidal clay particles that are microscopic particles of clay that are so tiny that they're lighter weight than a molecule of water. And in that case, you've got to figure out what you can do to make those little molecules of clay cling to each other and become heavy enough that they'll sink. And that's when we start talking about things like gypsum. Now, if the water's already got, like in Jason Todd's situation, odds are really, really high that there was enough gypsum in there that adding more gypsum was not going to make a difference. That means something else is going on. So in that case, alum, aluminum sulfate might be the situation. Now the thing you got to be careful about when you start looking at ways to clear up a muddy pond is you need to investigate it and do some testing just to see exactly why, if you can figure it out, why the water is muddy. And if you're going to use alum, you got to understand something, that you're going to take aluminum sulfate, put it in water. You're going to cause a chemical reaction, and you're going to have some circumstances to where you're going to create acid. So if you've got calcium sulfate, or you got aluminum sulfate, in terms of alum, you put aluminum sulfate in the water, you're going to end up creating sulfuric acid. And when that happens, you reach what I call a break point, to where you put in just enough alum to cause those little clay particles to flocculate. Ooh, scientific word. Where they get magnetic enough, where they cling together enough, where they'll sink. If you add too much aluminum sulfate, then they're going to cause the pH of the water to plummet. If you do that, fish die. There was this old washed-up football player with a ranch in Shreveport, Louisiana. This was back in the 90s. and I was working with Paul Dorsett down in Bryan College Station. He was working for me at the time. And I sent him over there to this washed-up football player's ranch to clear up his muddy pond. And I had bought him a pH meter that was run by a transistor 9-volt radio, transistor radio battery. And I said, be sure and check the pH as you're going. As soon as that pH shows a change, stop. And just be still. And just see what happens. So he called me on the way back. He says, man, he said, the pH never changed. He said, the water went from muddy to almost Caribbean blue. And oh man, I about fell out of my chair. I said, what do you mean the pH didn't change? He says, look, it never changed. I said, you got that pH meter with you? He says, yeah. I said, pull the battery out and stick it to your tongue. He pulled the battery out, stuck it to his tongue. It was dead. Well, if I played video games, I would have played all night long because I knew the next day I was going to be getting a phone call from that washed-up football player. Well, I decided I was going to be proactive and call him at 8 o'clock in the morning and tell him what had happened, that we had overtreated that lake, and just to see what was going on with it. Well, at 7:55, Terry Bradshaw calls me. We'd killed every fish in his daddy's lake. We'd overdone it. And I got to buy Terry Bradshaw's daddy a bunch of fish. Lessons we learn, right? Cheers. I just got a text. Let me see what it is here. So I'm working on a field day that's going to be really, really fun. Bill Shrum is checking in, and he's going to be there. Jim Allen's going to be there. I just sent an email to everybody that's going to be coming. Yeah, Jim, can you bring your traditional Kentucky? Yeah, as long as you don't mind lighting the fuse with your teeth, you can bring anything you want. Scott Grooms, good to see you, Scott. Man, I'd love to talk to you, Kevin Bjornson. I haven't caught up with you in a while. We need to call. We need to talk. We need to have a conversation. John Funk from mid-Michigan. Let's see, he's on the run. You watch this later. Think spring. Yeah, I'm thinking spring, dude. Dave Weber, the old-timers around here always said to spread a bale of good green alfalfa pay across a 1-acre pond to clear it up. Well, that's what the old-timers do because they're farmers. And I've tried that before. Might work, might not. Just depends on why the water's muddy. So the alfalfa hay, all that really does, if you take a square bale of that high-dollar alfalfa hay and you put it out in a pond, what the theory is this: it's going to be like a magnet and attract that those colloidal clay particles. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It just kind of depends on why the water's muddy. So there's a variety of things. I mean, I've heard everything from let the pond go empty and pigs will stomp it down and fix leaks and stop the muddy and that, a bunch of stuff that's out there. A whole bunch of that's just crazy, whatever. Hello, David Schneiderman, Easy Docs of Texas, checking in the subject. Jason Dodd, this subject is the very reason I will always be grateful for your knowledge. Saved me a bunch of dumb tacks. My whole mission in life is to save people from the dumb tacks and to teach principles, laws of nature, so you can be better stewards of your land and water. I haven't even had that much wine yet. Hello, John Harson. Good to see you, buddy. So that's kind of my first take on muddy ponds and muddy lakes. What I tell folks is to get a jar of the water, set it on a shelf in the garage, come back and look at it in 5 days to a week. If it's cleared up, it's physically stirred up. If it hasn't, then start running some tests. Try to figure out what works. You can go buy some gypsum, and I think I'm going to end up writing an article. I don't know if it'll be in the March, April issue or the May, June issue of Pond Boss, but I'm getting ready to have a conversation with this United States gypsum team, and they've got a scientist that they've told me about that understands the chemistry of water, and so I'm going to have a good conversation with him and see about writing an article for Pond Boss. So, hey, if you haven't subscribed to Pond Boss, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. You guys knew that. Pond Boss. I'm going to leave this one in the bag. It's got my name on it because it gets mailed here. I'm thinking after I die, if I've got a whole bunch of these in plastic, that you can auction them off and we can send some money to a scholarship fund. What would you pay for a Bob Lusk Pond Boss in its original package? Would you pay like $6, even though it's worth like $8? I'm just messing with you. Okay, hey, earlier this week, let's see, what's the day? Hell, it's Tuesday. I guess it was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. I get to do some pretty cool stuff. People ask me, how are you doing? I always tell them, I'm still leading a pretty cool life. I will be 70 years old, March the 28th. Send a bottle of wine for my birthday. You think I'm kidding? I love that. David Schneiderman, Easy Docs. Let the jar of pottled water sit for 2 years and your pond will magically clear up. Now that's a good line right there. I like that. Sounds like you're in the pond management business. Should we have got our new issue? John Harson says, should we have got, yeah, you should have gotten your January, February issue 3 or 4 weeks ago. If you haven't gotten your January, February, then the post office is dragging their feet, which they do. So, I have so many stories. Trying to decide if I want to tell this one. It's kind of long. I'm just going to do it this way. I graduated from Richland High School in 1973. My geometry teacher, when I was a junior or a sophomore, I can't remember which, was Steve Hodges. Steve and his wife, Carol, 2 years after I graduated from Richland, I was about to graduate from Tarrant County Junior College. They took me down to Texas A&M University. And that trip, they took me to a football game at Kyle Field when it was still only 2 decks. Kevin Matney got his last week. I got mine like 10 days ago. Okay, John, if you haven't gotten it in the next 3 or 4 days, holler at the office. Just call the Pond Boss office and let Leanne, or send an email to info@pondboss.com and say, hey, haven't gotten my magazine. And we'll make sure you get one. Scott Grunes, how would bulk gypsum be applied? I'll get to that. That's a good question. That's a good common sense thing. So anyway, the Hodges took me down to Texas A&M, and it was that trip that made me decide I was going to go to Texas A&M and study about fisheries, which I'm so glad I did. It was really, really worth it. Well, I've stayed in touch. Steve Hodges died a long time ago. He had leukemia, died when he was pretty young, and I stayed in touch with Carol, his widow. Well, she's got some kinfolks. I think it's brother and sister-in-law. Or I don't know what they're kin. I know that. So they live in Tyler, Texas. Well, they just bought some property just a little bit northeast of Palestine, Texas. So I went over there yesterday to meet up with them, and it was real muddy and sticky and kind of yucky. They'd had quite a bit of rain, and they've got this lake that probably used to be 35 acres. It was built in 1953, so it's 70 years old, over 70 years old, and the upper third of that lake is silted in, and the dam is really chewed up from erosion. Trees are grown up all over the backside slope. There's a couple of weak spots in the dam where it's eroded so heavily that dam could collapse. So we started talking about it, and as we discussed it, what we talked about was cutting the dam, draining the lake, not worrying about the upper third of the lake because that juice is not worth the squeeze to try to get that much silt out, and they have no place to put it. So the discussion was, how can we take the lower 15 or 18 acres and turn it into a good fishing lake? Well, then I got back, and the owner, Travis Pierce, he had made an offhand comment. He said, is there a place downstream we could build a dam and maybe build another lake? So I got back, and this morning I was looking at Google Earth, looking at that lake. If you want to look at it, go to Google Earth and look at McDonald Lake Palestine, Texas, and you'll see it. And you'll see how the upper reaches of that lake are silted in heavy. It's more of a marsh than it is a lake, which has great value, by the way. That marsh acts as a filter, plus it's super good habitat for waterfowl. And they would have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to take the silt out of that lake with nowhere to put it. So what I got talking to him about, I said, you know what, why don't you guys look at just draining the lake, cutting that dam down, and building a brand new dam right there where that one sits. Well, the earth mover was there, and he started talking to him and said, you know, it's probably going to take $200,000 to do that. And my guess was more like $300,000. So as I got back and started thinking about it this morning, I started digging into it and looking at it. There's a site just immediately downstream where they could build a brand new dam, 2 feet higher than the existing dam vertically, do some clearing, add 7 acres to the lake, shave the existing dam down, lower the level of the lake about 6 or 7 feet, and do some shaping around the east side shore where the human activity is going to happen. And they could build them a pretty darn good fishing lake that would cover probably 20 to 25 acres. So the point being is that if you start thinking a little more creatively and get outside the box, there's some fun things you might be able to do and help save some of that dumb tax. So that's where we're going with that. Scott, how do we apply bulk gypsum? Well, here's the way that works. You're in Tulsa. There's several gypsum mines down southwest of Oklahoma City. So what I typically tell people is that you can buy dump truck loads of that stuff, and it doesn't have to be ground into powder. As a matter of fact, I was talking to the U.S. gypsum guys, and they said, you know, the bigger the chunks, the less we have to process it, the less it costs, the least it costs. So those mines down there, what my recommendations have typically been is to buy more than you need and buy it in rocks that are about the same size as softballs up to volleyballs, and get it delivered and then drop it in your pond with a front end loader. So what it basically does is if you drop it in piles, you can create some fish habitat for little bitty fish and put enough gypsum in there that it can dissolve slowly over time and help clear up that muddy water. So if gypsum works to clear up that muddy water, that's a pretty good way to do it. So the bulk gypsum can be applied several ways. And that way you get, you know, a 20-ton load or whatever it is, 10-ton load, whatever you need. And then you take a front end loader in the bucket, and then you go pile it up in 7 or 8 or 10 different places around the pond. You can't read the label when you're inside the boat. Oh, John Dyer, dude, you're getting philosophical. You know what? You cannot read the label when you're inside the box. Show me a cornflake and tell you what they're made of. Cheers to that. I love that. But you know what? You also got to know what the box is. So that's part of the fun I get to have is, what is the box? Figure out what the box is and what do we need to do to get out of it. The other way to deal with bulk gypsum is, and I was talking to the U.S. gypsum guy about this yesterday, or whenever it was. I think it was yesterday after I got back from that trip to East Texas. And yeah, it was. And so he said that they sell it in like 80-pound bags and they sell it powdered. Hello, Doug Cusick. Good to see you, buddy. Glad you're checking in. You know what I forgot to say early on? Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like, share this to your video, and you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat, which I cannot remember the last time we did a drawing, but I guess we better do that. Why not? But one of the things I've seen guys do, and Bob McFarland did this over in East Texas. Actually, he did this with lime. He put ag lime. So he got his John boat out there, laid a 4 by 8 foot sheet of plywood on the bow of the boat, cut the bags, poured the lime on the plywood, then used a battery-powered leaf blower and blew it off into the lake. Well, so Dave Weber, gypsum, the way gypsum works, gypsum is calcium sulfate. Limestone is calcium carbonate, ag lime. So the calcium sulfate actually breaks apart, loses its bond, and it binds with the colloidal clay. So the colloidal clay are cations, and they bind with the anion, which is the sulfate. When they do that, it causes them to be similar to being magnetized, which makes them attracted to each other, and then it flocculates. Y'all look that word up and tell me what it means. So that's the way gypsum works. So gypsum dissolves into the water, and it actually causes the microscopic clay particles to become magnetized where they stick together and they get heavy enough that they sink out. So John Harson, you can get synthetic gypsum from coal power plants. It's more pure calcium sulfate. I did not know that. Clear as mud. Weber, you're pretty cute. Hey, I got your pictures. I'm going to stick those in Ask the Boss. Hey, if you guys want to see how Dave Weber thinks, tag up with us to get the March, April issue of Pond Boss. I am feverishly working on that right now. It will not be in your mailbox by March the 1st. Holy cow, John Harson worked at a gypsum plant. There you go. Well, okay. Clear as mud, says Dave Weber. All right, guys, throw me some questions. I don't want to sit here and drink. I want to sit here and think, and you guys need to pitch some stuff at me. I'm kind of shot my load on this old lake and gypsum stuff. I'm wanting to finish that wine so I can hit this old fashioned. Ooh, the ice is already melted. Ooh, it's not good to mix it. I don't know what I'm thinking. Okay, you guys need to pitch something at me. Come on. Okay, so John says it's a byproduct of where they scrub the sulfur out of the flue gas. Okay. Bill Schrum, besides reducing habitat, is there a downside to treating filamentous algae? Water temperature in the mid-40s. Should I use dye as well to help control it? I know it could hinder spawning, and that will happen soon. Okay. John Harson, I knew you were a smart fella. Better than being a fart smeller. I didn't really say that. No, I knew you were. Do you need some affirmation? Oh, I know. He's throwing rocks at me. All right, Bill Schrum. Besides reducing habitat, is there a downside to treating? There's really the filamentous. I do not see filamentous algae as good habitat. I see it as one of the first plants coming out of the winter that wants to grow and gaining advantage over all other plants. And I see it as binding nutrients. So I really do not see filamentous algae as a habitat element. Although, if you don't have any habitat, I guess it is. If anybody's going to use a dye, do it right now. Because if you're going to use dye right now, that gives nature some time to let it fade out by the time the water temperature gets up into the upper 50s when fertility starts to kick in. John Harson, smart fella. Uh-oh, I just scrolled past all you guys. All right, let's see what else we got here. Debbie went to get a grandchild, and she'll be home at about 8 o'clock. So I'm going to hang out with you guys for a little while. And now I'm trying to see what we got here. I'm still digging with a pond. I can't find a good local builder to work with on my... Oh, so Doug Cusick's still dealing with... Harson, you're killing me, dude. I'm still dealing with my pond. I can't find a good local builder to work with on my... Yeah, that's a pain in the butt. Okay, John Harrison, tell us about fertilizer. Well, all right, I'll tell you about fertilizer, and then I will come back to wipers. Tell us about fertilizer. So, all right, now, I will tell you this. Going back decades ago, we didn't worry too much about over fertilizing ponds because typically, and of course, you got to understand, I've worked mostly on ponds in the south and southwest. Southwest meaning Texas, the south meaning anything Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, up through Tennessee, Oklahoma, southern Missouri, Arkansas. When you add most of these waters are lacking phosphorus, but when you get north of where we are, a lot of water has too much phosphorus. So you got to be careful about that. When you have too much phosphorus and the wrong amount of nitrogen, then when you get so much phosphorus, then that leads to the situation where you can end up with some harmful algal blooms, some hard algae, some bad blue-green algae type stuff. Like Kevin Bjornson deals with that. Matt Rail deals with that. Big Frog Wilson, John Wilson deals with that. He's typically on the show, but he deals with that. That's probably a big part of his business, other than helping maintain the aesthetics of ponds and lakes in the Midwest. So typically, like where I am in Texas, Louisiana, parts of Oklahoma, we like to use a high phosphorus fertilizer to promote the genesis of a plankton bloom, which does two things. A plankton bloom in the springtime helps mitigate aquatic plant growth because it shades the sunlight off the bottom. If we can fertilize a pond and get a bloom, then we've created the basis of the food chain for newly hatched fish, which is real important for us when we're trying to grow fish. A fertile pond will grow at least 4 times the volume of bait fish that a crystal clear pond will. So that's a key component in fisheries management. Can wipers control bluegill? Michael Eric asks in Iowa. No, they really can't. Now, the good thing about bluegills in Iowa is they tend to spawn 2 times a year, maybe 3. So part of the way wipers can help manage bluegill is bluegill help them manage themselves because they don't reproduce as much as they do like in Texas. In Texas, bluegill are going to spawn, if we're in a line east and west from Waco south, they're going to spawn 5 times a year. From Waco up to North Texas, like along the Red River, they'll spawn 4 times a year. So in that case, wipers cannot keep up with the rapid reproduction of bluegills. And wipers, it's one of the myths about wipers, which is a hybrid striper, by the way, a palmetto bass, they call it, which is a cross between, I think it's female stripers and male sand bass or white bass. One of the misconceptions is that they live only in open water. They really don't. I've electrofished them in water 6 inches deep when they really should be way out in deeper water, and they're not. But they will not control bluegills in most cases. However, they'll feed on bluegills and they'll compete with largemouth bass. Okay, so Kevin Matney, do not use dye if there's still ice on the pond. That's some pretty common sense logic right there, Kevin. Jay Spires, otters gotten 3 in about a month and a half in Southwest Virginia. Have you heard of that many in a span in this area? No, yes, I have. Yeah, otters have really expanded their geographic range in the last 20 years or so, which, gosh, this is my 46th year of doing this. We never heard of otters until about 20 years ago, thanks to a bunch of state agencies stocking them because they're good natural predators. Wink, wink, wink. Jay, you're beyond lucky. How long will the dye last, asks Dave Weber. It doesn't depend on temperature. It depends more so on photo period and how much flow rate you've got. Danny Max chiming in with his light beer. Love me some Danny Mac. Danny Mac's one of the coolest guys on the planet. He's absolutely brilliant. For smaller waters, a gallon of Rapid Clear per 0.3 acre feet is very effective at flocculating everything. You are a flocculator. Based on an acrylic compound creating anionic binders, but $62 per gallon, $200 to $100 per acre foot. $200 per acre foot. I mean, if it's muddy, Danny Mac, there's a scientist. The dude is like a nuclear engineer, and he knows all this stuff, so do not question what he tells you. Just write the check. Will we tailor fertilizer? I don't know what that means. Jay Spires, first time dealing with pond, about 3.5 years old. Didn't see or haven't seen any evidence of them. Otters, until I saw one swimming around doing a backstroke. Well, I mentioned Bob McFarland a while ago blowing lime off the bow of his boat. He emailed me one day, gosh, this is probably 15 years ago, and he says, Bob, have you seen otters around? He says, we're seeing 2 otters, and they're so cute. They swim on their backs, and Donna loves them, and golly, they're just so much fun to watch. Well, I responded to his email, and I said like that Louisiana guy says, shoot them. And he was almost indignant. He said, I can't shoot those otters. My wife loves them. They're so cute. I said, well, dude, whenever they eat one of your big bass and you find out about it, you're going to change your mind. Boy, it wasn't 6 weeks later, he sends me a picture of his wife holding a shotgun with an otter by the tail. Seems that an otter caught about a 6-pound bass, 5 years old, and chewed the guts out of it and laid it up on their dock so they could find it. So, Jim Allen just saw scat from our otters today for the first time. There you go. 7:07, I'm yawning. What's the minimum temperature to expect a plankton bloom? I'm going to say this. I have seen plankton blooms initiate in the perfect conditions at 55 degrees. But I'm going to also say this. For the most part, the water temperature's got to be in the upper 50s, lower 60s before a plankton bloom will kick in. In Michigan, Kevin Matney dyes his pond twice a year. Any of the Texas fish dealers have gambusia that you're aware of? No, there are not. Gambusia are also called topwater minnows and mosquito fish, Dave. And the only time that I ever see any gambusia is it come in with a load of fathead minnows. Well, the fathead minnow dealers are not going to take the time to grade off the gambusias. Nobody raises gambusias on purpose. Jim Allen, is there a wall for flocculators in the Hall of Fame? Yep, and you're on it. Hey, Bobby West, I emailed you a while ago. Good to see you, buddy. Hope you can make our little event coming up. What do you mean you don't know what Taylor means? I don't know what Taylor means. Taylor Swift? Taylor that makes clothes? I'm a little slow on the uptake. I'm not a smart man. Not for that anyway. I can beat you on the fish stuff, but not Taylor. I guess I'm going to challenge you to tell me. Doug Cusick, you can't have otters and fish both. There's quite a bit of that. John Arson, will we customize our fertilizer program based on my Texas A&M? We can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Or just done. No, the disc visibility test is just all that tells you. A disc visibility test, all that really tells you is where it is at that moment, but it doesn't give you any science. All it does is give you results. So, the Texas A&M water test, if you can take a look at your anions compared to your cations, anions compared to cations, look at the total amount of phosphorus in the different forms, compare to the different kinds of nitrogen in different forms. That can give you an idea as to whether you need to fertilize or not. Okay, do you have a spot picked out of the Mayhire? Yes, I do. Holy cow! It's in the last issue of Pond Boss. Let me hear. Hold on, dude. Let me find this. Here's an ad. I'm gonna disappear for a minute, although I don't think I'm disappearing. Yeah, we do. We've got the Institute of Higher Pondology. I'm glad you're talking about that because I need to promote it. Matter of fact, I need to stop and do some commercials, don't I? So I'm going to scroll through. We've got May and October figured out. So I'm looking at it. Y'all bear with me a minute because it's going to take me a minute to find it. But we've only got one person signed up so far, so we really need to get 7 or 8 more. Here it is right here. May 22 through 24. October 23 through 25 is the next 2 Institutes of Higher Pondology. So you guys check that out. We're going to be doing it. Bobby West is on here. It's going to be at his ranch, at West Haven Ranch. So we would love, really, really love, actually, we need more people. So you guys spread the word. And I'm going to promise you this. It is worth coming. It really is. Not only just because you get to hang out with me, I roll. If Debbie heard me say that, she would throw a wet sponge at me. But you get to hang out with Bobby and Jacob West. You get to go work on their lake. And you get to meet some really, really cool people. Because all the other people that attend this thing, if anybody comes, you guys will be friends for life, I promise. We'll have a lot of fun. And a lot of good knowledge, and help you save some dumb tax. The money you spend on this is $1,500, which is all in. That's housing, that's food, curriculum. You get a shirt and a hat and all the knowledge that you're ever going to want with this stuff. So you guys make plans to come. So you know what? 7:12. I'm going to stop and do a little commercial. Nothing like the hands-on experience. Bill Shrum ought to know because he came. And he did it. He hung out. And he learned it. And he's watching this show. He's addicted. Danny Mac, you're so funny. Hey, Bobby, if you're still on here, respond. I want to see how you respond to Danny Mac. Because Bobby West and Jacob have been in the car wash business since they were puppies. And they've got they do have some pretty cool lighting in their car washes. So Danny Mac's kind of driving through that little deal. Bird Dog It. You guys check out birddogit.com. And that's my son Jonathan. He came up with a great idea over 3 years ago. He's in his early 40s. He's got 3 young kids. He doesn't have time to mess with a hunting lease. He doesn't want to own a ranch. He's got a handful of friends, but he doesn't really want to call on his friends to go murder their deer. You know, he doesn't want to sign up with an outfitter because you got to plan that out a year in advance, year and a half in advance. So he came up with the idea of, you know, what if we want to go hunting and we're sitting there we're at the country club and we're having dinner and some friends come up and said, hey, let's go hunting. There's no way to do that. So he came up with the idea to create kind of like a bed and breakfast or an Airbnb for hunting. And not only that, he's expanded the services into helping ranchers and farmers with soil conditions and with different productivity and, you know, grasses. And there's some pretty cool stuff. So you guys check out Bird Dog It. Bobby West has got car wash lights in the boathouse. Danny Mac, it's probably about time you come to the next Institute of Higher Pondology. Not only does Bobby West have car wash lights in the boathouse, he's got car wash parts in his lake. And the bluegill and the bass love them. There's pictures somewhere. Climbing the shocker boat and the electric fishing boat, and you'll see it. Purina Mills, hey. I think I told you this last week. Had a really good conversation with the Purina Mills marketing guys. They realized they made a mistake by discontinuing Aquamax Largemouth. So now they're trying to get the higher ups to give them permission to make several runs of Aquamax largemouth. If any of you guys feed that, if you feed Aquamax largemouth, send me an email. Send it to boblusk@outlook.com and let me forward it to those guys because I want to turn up the gas. I love Purina Mills. I've worked with those guys since 1995. Almost 30 years I've worked with them to help them develop new feeds and help them market those feeds. I have grown some gigantic fish off their feeds. I totally believe in their feeds. Their business model, not as much. You know, and I'm just being straight up. And they know that. They've heard me say that. But their products are fantastic. You know, Texas Hunter products. I love Texas Hunter. They got some fantastic fish feeders. They've got some really, really good fish habitat stuff. They've got great customer service. Not only their products great, but their customer service is stellar. I was talking about Jonathan, my son, and the battery in his feeder was dead, so I sent an email to Cody over there at Texas Hunter. A day later, Jonathan had a new battery for his feeder, and the suggestion was maybe the solar panel was bad. So he did a little checking and found out that he needed another solar panel, so they sent him one of those. You know, so it's pretty cool stuff. There's Mark Dyer chiming in. You know what? I'm not gonna read that out loud. That stands on its own merit. Thank you, Mark Dyer from Nebraska. Mark Dyer came to the last Institute of Higher Pondology, so he's not blowing smoke. Danny Mac was feeding Optimal bass throw, so I really want Purina to make big. Yeah, I know. And Optimal went out of business, so Purina's got to step up, and they know it. I've made sure they know it, so we'll see what happens. Hey, David Schneiderman, he was on there a while ago. Hope he's still here. David, he's still here. Tell us, put up, make a little post to tell us about how to find your website so people can check out Easy Docs. Not really sleepy. All right, help me with some more topics. You know what? I'm kind of I flew out there. I told you a little bit about this field day that's coming up. I'm working on a field day for a client that's got a 104-acre lake, Bay Miltonberger, who comes on and watches this show quite a bit. He may be watching tonight, just lurking and not letting us know he's here, which is okay with me. But my gosh, this field day is morphed. So his lake needs to have some catfish, crappie, and carp harvested from it. So there's David Schneiderman. He's still there. Yeah, I set that little bait and he took it. Attaboy. Jeremy Day. And, you know, show prep is the reason I was not able to look at your water quality, which I don't do that much show prep, but here we are. You know, but anyway, working on this field day, we need to harvest a bunch of fish. So I thought about it and I started thinking, okay, we need to take out 1,000 or 1,500 pounds of catfish out of this lake. We need to take out 50, 60 pounds per acre, 500 pounds of crappie. We need to take out 2,000 pounds of carp. And I thought, we don't need to waste those fish. Yeah, there's Bay Miltonberger. Yep, so Bay, so we're going to have the biggest concert ever. We're going to have Woodstock at Bay's house. So Bay is there. Yeah, well, I called you out, didn't I? There you are. Yazgur on, yeah, so that's Woodstock. So we got Bass Pro Shops coming with their fish acquisition team. We've got Red Hills Hatchery, who raises Titan bass, who is kind of cornering the market on genetic studies. They're going to collect some samples of bass to look at the genetics that Bay's got in his 104-acre lake over near Hyco, Texas. Look up Gilmore Creek Lake on Google Earth, and you'll see it. Very, very cool lake. I don't know that I've really told Bay this, but in my 45-year career, I think this project may be, I know it's going to be in the top 5 most fun things I've ever done, and probably the top 5 most productive things that I've ever had the chance to work on. And it's because of that guy and that lake. Because, Mark, are we timing it when the carp runs shallow? No, we're timing it because there's carp everywhere. The methods of carp, catfish, and crappie. So we're going to do two. I've got at least, I know we got 2 electrofishing boats. I think we've got 3 coming, and we may have 4 electrofishing boats. I'll confirm that in the next couple of days. But we're going to do electrofishing. We're going to set some trot lines. I've got people targeting carp with dough bait, targeting catfish with cut shad, because there's a lot of shad in that lake. And so we're going to do electrofishing, angling, and trot lining to see how many fish we can catch. So Bass Pro Shops is going to take as many fish as they can get to go back into their, what they call base camp in Springfield, and they're going to use a bunch of these fish that the Bay is donating to use in their displays in their aquaria. And what Bass Pro Shops is doing for Bay is they're going to providing with some trot lines and with 100 pit tags and a pit tag reader. That's $2,000 worth of stuff right there. Just the tags and the pit tag reader. Maybe more than that. So that's going to give us a chance to monitor some largemouth bass, monitor their growth rates. Then we're going to be looking at their genetics. Jim Allen, who's on this show right now, is he's working on an intellectual property thing to figure out how to age largemouth bass specifically while they're still alive. So we're going to collect a bunch of scales. We got some American Fisheries Society student members, 11 of them coming from Texas A&M. And we've got Ron Ardoin, Peyton Igo, we've got Ike Perkins, all these people that are really, really good fisheries people coming. Andy Benson with Mossback Fish Habitat is coming. And we're going to have probably close to 30 people off and on for 2 days helping us collect fish and learn how to do all these different fisheries management techniques. It's going to be a heck of a deal. Well, going back to Mark Dyer's question, are we timing it when the carp are shallow? No, probably not. But what's going to happen is there's enough shallow water in this lake that if the temperature's at least in the upper 50s, lower 60s, they're going to be up feeding in that shallow water. So I'm not too worried about how many we're going to get. Okay, let's see what Lori Moreno Wanke says. I'm the recent inheritor of a 3-acre bass, catfish, and bluegill fishing pond. What's the first thing I should address in terms of pond management? That's a great question. The first thing that's most important is make sure your water's happy. So I'm going to say some water chemistry. And if you've got bass, catfish, and bluegill, the water's probably happy. And the second thing is, what kind of habitat do they have? Do they have really, really good habitat? And there's not much way that you would know that until you learn about those different kinds of fish. So why don't you send me an email at info@pondboss.com, and I'll help guide you through that. But, and what you need to do is send me that email, Lori, and tell me what the goal is. Why'd you buy the place? What do you expect from that pond? And tell me a little bit about what you know about that fishery. If you'll tell me that, then I can give you some answers. Jerry Uller, what's his school? I came late. Jerry Uller is a famous videographer from San Antonio, Texas. He has been in the TV business forever and just a great guy. The Institute of Higher Pondology is what I'm talking about there, Jerry, and I've been doing it now, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And it's where I bring people in and they learn about lake management. Hello, Todd Austin. Tommy Welsh, our favorite tattoo artist. This is year 3 since I had my copper-nosed bluegill. When should I start to harvest them, and how do I know which ones to harvest so they won't be overcrowded? So what you need to do there, Tommy, is just, if you'll weigh and measure some and just see how well they're growing, and make sure that they're I guess the best way to explain it is their relative weights are healthy. So when you catch, a 1.5 pound bluegill and it's thick, got broad shoulders, kind of a helmet on its head, and it's deep bodied with good circumference, good girth, then it's growing well. But if you catch some and they're losing weight, that's when you need to harvest some. And you harvest the ones, I tell you what you do. Do not take your biggest bluegill. Take the next size down. And Tommy, I think if I remember right, you're from Kentucky, and I think you've got bass in that pond. Bass are going to help you keep those bluegill from getting overcrowded. So Bill Shrum says, will a red-eared sunfish, bluegill hybrid, or red-eared green sunfish still eat snails? Yes, they will. Anything that's crossed with a red ear will still eat snails because they got those bony pads back in their throat. Jeremy Day, how long does calcium carbonate take to dissolve in the water? Does water temperature impact absorption speed? Water temperature does not impact absorption speed. What impacts that is how much calcium is in it. Water is like a sponge. It's going to absorb what it needs. Doesn't really matter in this case, on minerals and metals, doesn't really matter what the temperature is. It's going to absorb what it's lacking. So, to give you answer that question, how long does it take calcium carbonate? Depends on the size of the particles. So if you put a whole bunch of basketball-sized rocks of lime in that lake, it's going to take longer for that to dissolve than if you put in ag lime. So it kind of depends. It really depends on how big the particles are. John Funk from Michigan checking in. Yep. Well, guys, let's see. Tommy Wilson, there's no habitat in my pond. Do I need to add some for bluegill to hide? But will that make it hard for the bass? No. If you'll have 20 to 25% of your pond with some kind of structure that bluegill can hide in, like rock piles, Christmas trees, things like that, then if you don't have any habitat, the bass are going to keep them under control. You got to have a little bit of habitat so you can have recruitment, what we call recruitment in fisheries. So recruitment is the ability to have fish survive from one year to the next, to the next, to the next. So if you don't have a lot of bluegill surviving because they don't have any habitat, then you get down the road 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're going to run out of big bluegill. Would it be fun to have an informal hands-on class on removing ear bones? Yes, it will, and we're going to have that. We're going to do that at this field day at Bay's house, or Bay's Ranch, there at Gilmore Creek Ranch. So Jim Allen, the fish ager dude, yes, we're going to do that. That's absolutely going to happen. And we're going to have a whole bunch of Aggie students, and I'm going to make sure they've got scalpels, which I need to put that on my list of things to do, scalpels. And they're going to be digging in there and getting some ear bones out of a few bass, probably some crappie, and probably some carp. So, all right, guys, here we are. We're 58 minutes into this deal, and I'm running out of gas, and I'm running out of topics. So, hey, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date. If you have not subscribed to Pond Boss, please do. Helps fuel the economy that makes this stuff happen. So, guys, I always appreciate you guys chiming in and watching the show, and I'm glad to see Bay checking in. I had to kind of call him out, but it's always fascinates me because I really don't know who's watching. I don't, and it's really kind of fun to check it in and check it out and see who's watching. So until next Tuesday, I'm not sure where I'll be next Tuesday. What's this? Is 25th, 6, 7, 28. I'm leaving on. Debbie coerced me to go on a cruise with her on March the 6th. So, I see another question. Why do I say bluegill are the backbone of the food chain? But bluegill are the backbone of the food chain because they reproduce prolifically and they reproduce over and over and over. So they're reproducing enough compared to all the other bait fish that they're the ones that are the backbone of the food chain. We're knocking on an hour. So, hey, I really appreciate you guys watching And I'm not sure where I'll be next Tuesday, but I got a feeling it's going to be hanging out with you. So until then, adios for now.